Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next election prediction video. We are now 24 days until the 2022 midterm elections. It's getting really close, guys. We're getting so close to the end. Looking forward to seeing the final results and seeing how my predictions hold up in some of these states. Today we're going to be doing my updated Senate election prediction for the 2022 elections. This is probably going to be my third to last prediction because I think I'll make one in between my last one and this one. So this is my third to last prediction. I'll probably make one on the final weekend. The final one will probably be the final made. I will put it out on the final weekend or on election day of this year. So expect my final prediction then. You'll probably see one more from me before the end of between this one and the final one. But yeah, we're getting really close to the end, guys. I'm looking forward to moving on to 2024, but I am really stoked to see the results in 2022 and just see, how these midterms play out because it's going to be very interesting. I'll be my content on my channel is going to slow down after the midterms. I'll go back to my Interactor 127 channel to upload some more there, but don't worry, I'll still be making videos on here about 2024 and, the presidential election and the Senate elections and the House races. So, yeah, we've got, a lot to cover. So, yeah, let's get right into it. So, Joe Biden's approval has actually gone down a little bit. I think he's now disapproved it by 10.6%, just barely less than, or he's just barely, more unpopular than Trump was at this point in his presidency. Yeah, just by 0.1%. He was down by 9 points, or, yeah, 9 points on October 1st. Now he's down by 10.6. So yeah, 9.6 on October 1st. Now he's down by 10.6. So he's gone down a little bit in approval, but the red wave really hasn't been, coming in a lot of these states. We've started to see some Senate races and governor races narrow up, but those were completely expected. I mean, John Fetterman was never going to win by 10% in Pennsylvania. We'll get to Pennsylvania eventually, but you can see Republicans have made some improvement since since the last prediction. They've now gotten Democrats to a 0.8% lead, but Dobbs clearly had an effect. You can see that after Dobbs, after the Roe v. Wade decision, a couple days after, Republicans kind of just collapsed in the polling, and then eventually Democrats, they started to hold a narrow lead, and now they've held that lead for almost 2 months. In fact, at one point they were almost up by 2 points. And, after Labor Day, there wasn't really a surge actually for the Republicans, more so for the Democrats. You can see Democrats actually slightly went up. Now they're going back down because, the election's coming up. Republicans are getting more undecided to their side. But I still think Roe is going to help Democrats this in November. To what extent, I'm not sure, but it's clearly having an effect. And yeah, let's just get right into it. So we're going to start by filling out the safe Democratic and Republican states. These are states that will go to either party by over 15%. They really don't have a chance to go the other way. They are, pretty much exactly what they are. They're safe or solid states. You can see that Washington's not a safe state for the Democrats anymore. I'll talk about that in a minute. So yeah, but in Utah, I'm moving it back up to safe Republican. Evan McMullen's a really good candidate who, has gotten, being an independent and not a Democrat is really going to help him in this race. Oh my God. Sorry, there's like a little spider trying to get on my computer. It's like really small. But anyways, McMullen not being a Democrat in this race is really hopeful. He does have the Democratic Party support, and he'll get some traditional conservatives that don't really like Mike Lee or Donald Trump to his side. But at the end of the day, it's Utah. It's a state that Trump won by 20 points, which was pretty disappointing when you look at, Lee's victory in 2016 or Romney's victory in 2012. Utah is definitely a little bit, is a lot less Republican than it, used to be. I don't know if I'd say it's a lot less Republican, but it's slowly shifting Democratic, but it's not really ever going to be that competitive of a state. It's still the red state by heart, and Mike Lee, is gonna defeat McMullen, maybe a little bit maybe by under the margin might be under 15%, but I don't really think so. I think polls in Utah, well, they have been pretty wonky. In 2020, they said Trump would win the state by 10. He won it by almost 21. So, and McMullen was expected to do a lot better in 2016 than he ended up doing. I think he's actually supposed to get in second place. He got in third place, but it was still a strong showing. And, he's going to do well against Lee. It's going to be a lot closer than it was in 2016, but I still think it'll be over a 15-point margin. Um, Oklahoma, we've had some interesting polls out of there. Also, the governor's race looks like it's becoming a little bit more competitive, but governor and Senate elections are very different. In Oklahoma, as a state, Trump won by over 30 points. James Lankford and Mark Wayne Mullen James Lankford's going to get another term, and Mark Wayne Mullen will succeed Jim Inhofe. I could see the special election being a little bit closer. I think it will be closer than the regular election. But I think, it's still Oklahoma. Kendra Horn's an okay candidate for Democrats there, but she doesn't have a chance. Missouri could also have been likely, but I think, you know, the independents off the ballot. Eric Schmidt's, not a terrible candidate like Eric Greitens would have been. Trudy Bush Valentine's, making a play for this race, but it's really not going to, do anything in the end for her. So yeah, and in Indiana, we've had some wonky polling there that shows Todd Young kind of in a competitive race with the Democrat, but honestly, it's not going to be. It's Indiana. It might be a little bit closer because Indiana does tend to have closer elections down ballot, but I honestly don't think so. I think Todd Young is a pretty solid incumbent. Objectively, of course, not a big fan of him personally, but by by an objective standpoint, he's a pretty strong incumbent in an already pretty red state. Alaska, I don't think Shabaka's going to win this race. I think Lisa Murkowski's got it in the bag. I think, we're going to see Mary Peltola win in the House election. Murkowski's probably going to do very well in the Senate race. She might even win it outright. If you look at the same polls that that showed that showed Mary Peltola winning the third round of ranked choice voting. Um, they show Murkowski up by 14, and the Alaska Survey research was pretty accurate in that House election. So I do think that Murkowski. We're not going to know the results from Alaska probably on election night or soon after. I think it'll be maybe a couple weeks before we know who wins because Alaska takes forever to count their votes. But I do think Murkowski is still favored. She's got support from Democrats. She's still, she's very well known in the state. She won a write-in campaign in 2010, with less than which lasted less than 2 months, or that started less than 2 months after or before November 2010. So, before election day. So I think, if she can pull that off, she can definitely win against Shabaka. Alaska's a lot more independent of a state. It's also not it's traditionally a very red state, but like Utah, it's not that Trumpy of a state. It's, the Democrats are going to do well in the House race. They don't have a chance in the Senate race, but Murkowski, is going to get a lot of Democratic support. And, she did well in the primary. I think that she's got this race in the bag, but either way, it's going to be a Republican, even if Shabaka somehow wins. So now we've got the 12 states that will be under 15 points. These are going to be, the likely lean and tilt states. We're going to start off with likely. And, these are states that are going to go to either party by 5 to 15 percentage points. Not necessarily super competitive, but they're not safe either. Sorry, just had to take a deep breath there. So the first likely Republican state is Iowa. Chuck Grassley has a very strong history in the state, and it is moving to the right, but his margins have really decreased in recent years. In 2016, he won by 25 points. 2010, he had won by 31 points. 2004, even though George W. Bush barely won the state against John Kerry, Grassley won by 42 points. So you can see Iowa has really liked Chuck Grassley in the past, but he really did not. The citizens of Iowa really did not want Grassley to run for re-election, and I do think Michael Franken's an okay candidate for this race. He'll get it under 15 points. I think he might not. Iowa. He doesn't really have a chance to actually win this race, but it will be probably Grassley. I do think it'll be Grassley's closest election. Since his first one in 1980, we've seen At first we were seeing like the Grassley +4 numbers, which looked concerning for him, but that was never going to happen. That was my argument that I don't think the polls are going to be wrong, by 12 or 11 points. Now we're starting to see like Grassley +14, Grassley +11 polls, which I think are a lot more accurate. And, I did make a point that Grassley, did have a competitive race at first in 2016, but then, by September, he pretty much surged and he never really lost his momentum after that. So, if, it does seem he's gaining momentum, but I think he can win by over 15 points, but he's still, Iowa voters are kind of, getting a little tired of him, but they're still not going to push him out of Congress. Grassley is going to be elected to an eighth term in the U.S. Senate. State of Florida is the other likely state. Marco Rubio is very popular. He has an ability to appeal to Hispanics that Republicans have, up until recently, really struggled with. They're making gains now, but Rubio really was, he was an individual candidate who's not super polarizing. He can be polarizing at times, but, he is, kind of, known around the nation, you know, just kind of a generic Republican. He was a Tea Party Republican, but Florida seems to like that, and it's a state that's trending rightward. Val Demings is a really good candidate. I think she can do better with Hispanics than Charlie Crist will. Rubio, I think this might be closer than 2016, but I think it's going to be like a 7 or 8 point victory. It's not going to be that close at the end of the day. Democrats don't have a chance to win Florida. I'd be shocked I'd be very happy if Val Demings won, but realistically, it's not going to happen. So now we've got the likely Democratic states. I'm going to go over Washington. First, Patty Murray, I still think is very much on track to win this Senate race. People who are still saying Tiffany Smiley has a chance, I don't understand. Um, Murray did very well in the primary, which tends to be around 5 or 6 points better than the actual general election. But Murray's been kind of having a bit of trouble here. She's only up by 10 points, and she did outperform the polls in 2010 when she was in her actually competitive race and against Dino Rossi. And, she was pretty much in a dead heat with him, she won by about 5 points. Which does show that she's an overperformer, but at the end of the day, she's not a particularly strong Democrat. I really don't think that she's not gonna do, terribly well. I think she'll run behind her 2016 numbers and she'll win by a little under 15 points. It'll be like 12 to 14 points, but at the end of the day, Washington's not going red. And, the only time I could have seen it even having a small realistic chance of going red was back in February when we saw like public policy polling put out a poll that only showed Murray up 9, and it's a Democratic leaning pollster, so that was a little concerning. That was when, the consensus what became Washington's likely D. Now I think most people have it as safety, and I was one of those people. And it's by probability, it's absolutely safe, but I think that it will be under a 15-point margin. For the next likely state for the Democrats is Colorado. Michael Bennet, is a very strong incumbent. Republicans chose a good candidate in Joe O'Dea, but he is still in a state that voted for Biden by 14 points. It's very left trending. Jared Polis is probably going to, win by a very strong margin on the governor's level. And Colorado's not realistic. It's realistically not going to elect a Republican to the U.S. Senate. Cory Gardner lost by 9 points. John Hickenlooper easily defeated him. Did worse than Biden, but that was expected. Gardner was the incumbent. And there's an conservatives on the right are saying that that Odea's doing so terribly because of he's not paying enough attention to the rural areas, which I think is kind of an uninformed view because Odea needs the suburban support in order to win. He's been running a very moderate campaign. Some would even argue more liberal than Michael Bennett's. But, Bennett was able to win in 2010, which was a red wave year against a pretty bad opponent in Ken Buck. Even despite him, Ken Buck wasn't terrible, but he wasn't very good. Bennett won by around a point and a half, despite being down in the polling data. Colorado is actually kind of like Nevada, where it overestimates Republican support. It's done so in most elections. I think 2016, with Bennett's last Senate race, was the only exception to that. So Colorado, the rural areas are troubling for Odea, but I think he'll do a lot better than people expect. Trump did very well in the rural areas in 2020, in 2010, or sorry, 2020. Can't speak today. But he still lost the state by 14 points, so I don't really think that's a very good argument. I think that O'Dea will lose. I think Bennett will win by around 9 or 10 points at the end of the day. It's going to be less than Joe Biden's margin, but I do think it'll be larger than Bennett's 2016 margin. He's going to be fine, I think. And the last likely state we have is for the Democrats and for any for the either party is the state of New Hampshire. This shouldn't be too shocking to people. I understand why some people have it as lean D. New Hampshire does like to swing a lot, but Maggie Hassan is a very strong incumbent. Don Bolduc is not a very good candidate. He's better than I thought he would be. He's actually moderating his campaign, but so is Blake Masters in Arizona, and that's not working out too well for him. And Bolduc, really, he's not that electable of a candidate. Maggie hasn't survived red waves before. I don't think this year's going to be that big of a red wave. You can make the argument, yeah, she barely beat Kelly Ayotte in 2016, but the fact that she even won against Ayotte, was an electoral juggernaut in the state. Just look at 2010, proves that Hassan's a very strong incumbent. This was really a silver lining for Democrats, in a year in which they lost Congress and the presidency. So I do think Hassan is on track to win. I think that if Kelly Ayotte or Chris Sununu ran, this would be a very competitive race. I think Sununu would have made this race lean Republican. In New Hampshire, it looked like it was going to be the GOP's key to the Senate at first, because Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia weren't looking too good at first. And Sununu was expected to run. He made several hints about it, and I was really shocked when he decided not to run. That made the race a lot more solid for Hassan. And Kelly Ayotte turned it down. Chuck Morris was really the Republicans' last chance to realistically win in New Hampshire. I think it could be a lean Democratic state because I think Bolduc's not an absolutely terrible candidate, but he's a Trump he's a Trump Republican. He's an anti-war candidate, which is the argument on the right that why he's a bad candidate, which is not the only reason, but whatever. Um, so Hassan's going to have a very solid reelection. I mean, obviously not safe for the reelection. Could be closer because New Hampshire likes to swing, but it's a Biden plus 7 state. It almost always votes for Democrats. Chris Sununu will win his reelection in the governor's race, no doubt, but Maggie Hassan is going to win the Senate race by a pretty large margin, by around 5 or 6 points, I think, maybe 7. The polls in New Hampshire really haven't been that bad before. They were bad in 2020, and they were a little bad in 2020. They said Biden would win this state by around 11 points, but he only won it by 7. When you look back at other years, though, New Hampshire has been very accurate when it comes to polling data. So the last 7 states are the most competitive. These are the states that I really think are the ones that you should probably keep your eyes on. These are the lean and tilt states. We'll start off with the lean states. These are, when we're getting into the actually competitive states in terms of the Senate races. The lean states will go to either party. Um, um, by 1 to 5 points. They're not solid at all for either party. They're competitive, but a party the Democrats or Republicans, either have, they have a good advantage in these states. Not all of these states are lean for one party, but you know what I mean. I'm sorry, my head is really tired. I'm really tired today. I cannot think. So let's start off with the lean Republican states. First one. This is the state of North Carolina. I still think Ted Budd's going to win, but Sherry Beasley has really impressed me. The problem for Democrats in North Carolina is it's a really two-faced issue. In presidential years, Democrats tend to do poorly in North Carolina. They don't usually win it, anyway, but uh, more nationalized races tend to be more nationalized races in North Carolina tend to be more Republican. Localized races for Democrats though can be pretty pretty good. Sherry Beasley's running a localized campaign. Obviously, this is for the U.S. Senate, but she's the Democrats and Republicans haven't really spent too much time in North Carolina. They kind of wrote it off from the start as a Republican hold. Ted Budd's not a terrible candidate for the Republicans. He's one of the better candidates. He's a lot better than like Dr. Oz or Blake Masters or especially Herschel Walker. But he's kind of bad for the rural areas. I think he'll do decently in the suburbs. Beasley's key though is to get black turnout up to the point where she can actually pull out ahead of Bud. And, I don't know if she's going to do that. My guess is no. North Carolina's broken Democrats' hearts so many times in the past, but Beasley does have a higher shot than I originally anticipated. I think she'll lose by around 1 or 2 points at the end of the day. I think she'll do a lot better with black turnout, but honestly, or not, I think she'll do decently with a lot better than usual with black turnout in North Carolina for Democrats. But African American voter turnout isn't too high in midterm years usually, and that has really been Democrats' problems in North Carolina, and the polling data in the state has been pretty biased towards them. But they already have Ted Budd up, and I think that this is a pretty reasonable margin. Beasley's got a really good chance. I could see North Carolina being an upset flip for the Democrats. Especially with the suburbs and the Roe decision. That could really help Beasley. But honestly, I still think that Ted Budd's the favorite to be the next senator from the state of North Carolina. The next lean state we have is Wisconsin. Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes are still in a competitive race, but honestly, I don't think that Barnes is going to win. He's got a chance, but he needs to really bring Milwaukee turnout up to levels that we have not seen before. All the pollsters that were showing really good results from Mandela Barnes back in the summer. What kind of made me change my tune on this race and say, okay, Barnes might actually win this thing. I never said that he was unelectable, but that he wasn't going to do particularly well. But now, Republicans are starting to kind of panicked after that Trafalgar poll showed Barnes up by two. And, while Trafalgar's pretty Republican leaning, they're actually pretty accurate in Wisconsin, so this kind of gave Republicans a scare, and so they started funneling money into this race and started actually helping Johnson paint Barnes as a pretty extreme candidate. Take with that what you will. I'm still supporting Barnes in this race, but I don't think that he's going to win. He had his shot, but I don't think he's really gonna, change the direction of this race all that much. So I think Ron Johnson, he's a solid incumbent. Objectively, I'm not a big fan of him. Personally, just check out, my senators ranked. He's in the trash heap of those, but he is a strong candidate, and the polls in Wisconsin aren't too off. Usually in midterm years, they usually overestimate Democrats by a lot. Anyone who says Ron Johnson's going to win by 10 is just, I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. That's not conceivably possible. But Ron Johnson, I still think, is the favorite to win a third term in the Senate. Final lean state for the Republicans is Ohio. Now, I've thought about moving the state back up to likely. The polls in Wisconsin and in Ohio, sorry, have been pretty bad, midterm year or not. But JD Vance is just so underwhelming of a candidate that it perplexes me. It's so ridiculously bad. He's so ridiculously bad. And Ohio's still the red state. It's a Republican leaning swing state. It almost always votes for the GOP. And back in the summer, obviously I did not think that Vance was actually going to lose this race, or even, Ryan was the only pollster that I really even considered for making this race a little bit closer was Ryan's campaign poll, which only showed him up by three, but even then, though, that's not going to happen. There were a lot of partisan polls in the summer that showed Ryan ahead, but then we started to see actually, actual reputable sources like Emerson College, Trafalgar, which actually underestimated Trump in 2020. They're showing the race a little bit closer. They advanced up by 5 in August. Now he's only up by 4 in their most recent poll. And even in Republican, leaning pollsters like Signal, Vance is only up by 2. Emerson College, Vance is only up by 1. Siena College, a very good pollster, Ryan plus 3. So Vance is really not doing well in Ohio, and I get it. The polls are so bad in Ohio that I don't even want to, say that the race is going to be all that close. But the fact that, JD Vance is doing this terribly and that Tim Ryan is doing this well, is a really bad sign for the GOP. They've really panicked about this race. They gave Vance a lot of money, because Ryan was pretty much decimating him in fundraising. And I do think that Vance will win by around 2 or 3 points at the end of the day. But the fact that Ohio was this close in a year that was supposed to be so good for the GOP, and in a state that voted for Trump by 8 points, it's astonishing. I thought Vance was actually one of the better GOP nominees this cycle. I thought that he would win by around 7 points. I thought, Tim Ryan's a good candidate, but he doesn't really have a chance. The summer kind of made me waver a little bit, but not really. I'm really starting to think about possibly moving Ohio into the toss-up column. I'm not going to do it because I think that I'm going to need to see more convincing data for Tim Ryan. But honestly, he had a pretty good debate performance, and honestly, I think that we could have an ass kicker from the state of Ohio, to quote Tim Ryan. I'm really hoping that he wins, but honestly, I still think that Vance is going to win. It's going to be really close. It's going to be a lot closer than it should be. His campaign has just been terrible, but I don't think it's enough to put Ryan over the hump. But the fact that I'm even considering possibly moving Ohio below lean Republican just shows how bad the Vance is as a candidate. Not saying that I am like the supreme authority on who's a good candidate or not, but I think I have a pretty good feel on most of these races. So now we have the lean Democratic states. Arizona is the first one. Blake Masters has had an okay debate performance. I don't think it was particularly good. Don't think it was particularly bad. I think that him bringing up that the abortion bill that Lindsey Graham introduced was a bad move. I don't think Mark Kelly did that well either. But honestly, you know, Joni Ernst and Tom Tillis really didn't do that well in their Senate debates in 2020. And I know that there's like this conceived notion, I think, that scandals for Democrats matter more than it does for Republicans. It wavers their bases more, which I kind of understand why some people would think that. But honestly, Obama in 2012 was really not doing well with the crowd sizes of his rallies. His debate performances were pretty bad, and still he defeated Romney. You can argue that Romney wasn't that great of a candidate. I don't think he was really that bad. I don't think he was particularly good either, though. And Mark Kelly is a very strong candidate. He's outperforming Katie Hobbs by a lot. If things start to get really good for Kelly, I could possibly see moving this to the likely column. I'm really sorry. Oh, I'm just not feeling well today. But Kelly's still up by 6 points. He's really not wavered all that much since the last prediction. We've seen some reversion towards Masters. But even Republican pollsters show Mark Kelly up, and Martha McSally was, not a great candidate in 2020. She was pretty much dead in the water by the time election day hit us, but she, at least led in a couple of polls by this time, in 2020. Masters still hasn't led in a single poll. I think that Mark Kelly is going to be fine. I think the Democrats should really worry about Kari Lake in the governor's race. Not to say that Mark Kelly is guaranteed for re-election. They shouldn't take this race for granted. Masters had an okay debate performance, but at the end of the day, Arizona voters still really like Mark Kelly. He's going to get great turnout from the Phoenix area, and he's going to do very well in the suburbs. I think Masters is just not doing well with women voters the same way Lake is, and I just think that Mark Kelly at this point is pretty much locked and loaded for re-election. I could be wrong, but I think that Arizona votes for him by around 3 or 4 points, maybe two. I think it could be closer than expected. I don't think he's going to have a 6 point victory, but if things start to look on the up and up for Kelly, I could see that. In Pennsylvania, I know that the race has gotten a little bit closer. Oz is starting to narrow up the race, but that was always expected. Um, and Fetterman, I think we're going to see the debate next week. Fetterman's lead has been dropping, and I do think that I am considering moving this race down to back to the toss-up column. It's still a very competitive race, but I think that Fetterman, he's still up in Trafalgar, which had Trump winning Pennsylvania in 2020. He's up in Suffolk. He's up in Emerson. Yeah, he's not doing that as well as he was in the summer, but that was always predicted. Who thought that Fetterman was going to win by 10 points? Maybe a couple of people, but that was obviously not going to be correct. I think Fetterman will win by around 2 or 3 right now if the election was held. I think we're going to have a pretty close election in Pennsylvania uh, this year, not necessarily in the governor's election, but on the Senate level. I think we're going to have a fairly close election. But Oz is just such a bad candidate that I really do think that he just is such a lot of the issues with Republican candidates for Senate this cycle is that they're all so disingenuous. Mehmet Oz is not even from the state of Pennsylvania. I know it's become a meme at this point, but it's going to hurt him in the rural areas. Especially in Western Pennsylvania. You know, and I don't think he's going to do particularly well in the suburbs. I think that Fetterman is going to get a couple of Trump voters to his side, and I think he'll do pretty well in Western Pennsylvania. I think he'll win Erie by around 5, and he'll do. I think the path for Oz is kind of like to win this race, he needs to point out his health, and he's been doing that. But I really think that Fetterman is, not a terrible candidate. Oz is even worse, though. He is just such an astonishingly bad candidate, much worse than I originally thought. I thought that his moderate politics might be able to help him, but I honestly don't see him doing too well. He could bring, Fetterman could get less turnout from Philadelphia, which could hurt him. But at the same time, Josh Shapiro chose a black running mate for lieutenant governor, and I think that that will help Fetterman. Fetterman's really helping Shapiro out, is really going out to the rural areas of Pennsylvania. Shapiro staying in Philadelphia. I think that they're kind of coordinating, a plot to really just lock down Philadelphia and kind of help win some of the swing counties, like in Erie up here. So I do think Fetterman's still favored in Pennsylvania. Oz is narrowing up the race, but it's not enough to put it in the tilt column yet. Oz could win this race, but honestly, he's just such a bad candidate. He's said so many controversial things. He's not even really that well liked among Republicans. They're coming to him. His support from them is increasing, but that's because the election's coming around, and he's had a couple months, but he's still not doing well enough, I think, to win. He could win come election day, but I don't think he's going to. I think, Pennsylvania's polls are not that inaccurate in midterm years. They're generally not that inaccurate. Even in 2016, when the polls were off in Pennsylvania, it was still within the margin of error. So yes, that's my take on Pennsylvania. Georgia's back to Lindy. I don't need to tell you guys about it. Herschel Walker, his scandal with the abortion, with paying that woman for the abortion, is just not gonna help him at all. I think we had the debate yesterday. Yeah, we did. I watched it. Herschel Walker is unfortunately for him, I don't really think that he's gonna win. I think that even if he gets Warnock under 50%, which I think is still possible. I still think that's probably what's gonna happen. If it goes to a runoff, I really think Warnock is more likely than not to defeat Walker by a pretty large margin than that. Um, I think it'll be like 4 points in a runoff. But I could see Warnock winning just outright. He's doing a lot better than Stacey Abrams, and Walker's just the abortion thing isn't going to necessarily make voters go to rural areas shift towards Warnock. Or get more Warnock voters in the rural areas. It's just going to depress Republican turnout. And Walker's already such a bad candidate in the suburbs. He's just it's just really not good for the Republicans in Georgia right now. And with Georgia being one of the most important Senate elections, it could literally decide the Senate majority. It's not looking very good for the Republicans there. And as you can see, Democrats have got into 50, which means that Vice President Kamala Harris would break the tie if Nevada goes red. It's the last state. It's our only tilt state. And look, I get that Catherine Cortez Masto is a pretty good candidate for Hispanic voters that have been drifting away from Democrats. I get that Hispanics tend to go to move in the direction of the incumbent party in presidential years. But Nevada is really not that blue of a state. If you look at Harry Reid, his overperformance of the polls in 2010 was pretty significant. But Nevada is definitely a state that's slightly moving to the right. It's not really moving all that much, but you can see that Trump was able to do well with Hispanics, and really, the COVID lockdowns, uh, they really hurt Democrats in Las Vegas. And when you look at it, I get that Nevada polls almost always overestimate Democrats. And by the way, if it isn't already clear, Laxalt, I think, is favored to win this race. I could be very wrong. We saw that Cortez Masto is now leading in a poll for the first time since August. And Nevada polling is almost always it almost always overestimates Republicans. But I do think that despite Laxalt's candidacy flaws, I don't think he's that bad of a candidate. It's just the fact that he kind of had an underwhelming performance in his attorney general's race in 2014, and he lost the governor's race in 2018. So Cortez Masto is still very much in this race, but when you look at the issues the voters are talking about, even though Nevada is a very pro-choice state, and obviously abortion is, very accessible in the state, you know, and that might make voters more, they might make it might make more voters a little less hesitant to back Republicans. There's still the question of will Laxalt, vote for go vote with the GOP for a national abortion ban. And honestly, I think he would, but Nevada, their top issue is the economy. Nevada is, it's a state that's really been hit hard by the economic crisis we've been in recently. It's never been really a prosperous state, but Las Vegas has really been suffering. And I think with Hispanics trending to the right, even though Cortez Masto is a very strong incumbent in this area of in Clark County, she's going to do really well there. Or I don't know if she'll do particularly well there, but she'll do, I think, a little bit better with Hispanics than Biden. But the trends we saw in 2020 were unlike anything we've seen really in the modern day with rightward trends with Latino voters. And I think that with the economy being the top issue for voters, and with Laxalt not being an absolutely terrible candidate like Blake Masters, Herschel Walker, and Mehmet Oz are, I think that he does win this race. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I get the Nevada polls are not that great. When it comes to they do have problems with gauging Democratic support, but I still think that, Republicans will pull off a slight victory in the state of Nevada, but it's very close. It's a pure toss-up. I could see it going either way. And, I wanna address Washoe because someone brought up that Laxalt will probably lose Washoe because of the row issue, and I think that that's possible. But honestly, Cortez Masto, the reason she lost, well, actually, I'm not sure why she lost Washoe County in 2016. It's kind of uncertain, but she doesn't seem to perform as well as Democrats do in Northern Nevada, which isn't too well, but they usually win Washoe. And the thing is, someone brought up the fact that Joe Heck is from Reno, which isn't even true. I'll show you the house map. Go back to 2014. Joe Heck is from Las Vegas area, and he didn't do that well. Not trying to be mean or anything, but that was just absolutely not true. And yeah, Nevada is probably going to vote for the Republicans, I think, but it's very close. It's a toss-up. I'm gonna get to you guys about this race soon. I mean, I've already made a video about it, but you'll obviously see how the race changes. Could definitely still, I could definitely still see Cortez Masto winning, especially since Nevada is really a state that almost always goes to the Democrats. But I still think that Laxalt nearly pulls off a victory against Cortez Masto and flips the seat red. So in the final map, after all that talking, Democrats win 50 seats, Republicans win 50 seats. Democrats flip Pennsylvania but lose Nevada. The two flips cancel each other out, and it puts the Democrats with Vice President Kamala Harris once again breaking the 50-50 tie, and so Democrats retain control of the Senate for another 2 years. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Sorry that was so much rambling. Make sure to like and subscribe, share, turn on notifications so you don't miss another one of my videos. Check out my original channel, check out my main channel, Interactor127, and my comrades channel, GrowlingZoo666. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys next time with another political video. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.